The drone hovered above the cul-de-sac, its camera trained on the street. But as the self-proclaimed neighborhood watch looked on, the device suddenly plummeted, crashing through the windshield of the sheriff's patrol car. Sirens blared, residents fled their homes, and a fierce confrontation between the HOA president and the law was about to begin. Karen Richardson's fingers tightened around the drone's controls as she guided the device over the quiet suburban neighborhood. Perched in her living room window, she scanned the street with laser focus, searching for any sign of suspicious activity. Her neighbor Jill was out front watering her flower beds. Karen narrowed her eyes. Jill was always out here, seemingly doing nothing productive. Clearly, she was up to something. The drone swooped lower, its camera honing in on Jill. Karen tapped a button, zooming in for a closer look. Jill straightened up, glancing around with a puzzled expression. Karen smirked. Gotcha. Suddenly, the drone lurched violently to the side, spinning out of control. Karen let out a panicked cry, desperately trying to regain command. But it was too late. The drone careened straight toward the street, colliding with the windshield of a nearby patrol car with a sickening crunch. Tires screeched as the sheriff's deputy slammed on the brakes. Karen watched in horror as the car swerved and careened to a stop, the drone's shattered remains littering the pavement. Neighbors poured out of their homes, drawn by the commotion. Karen rushed outside, heart pounding. This was bad, very bad. She approached the deputy, who was already emerging from his vehicle, face twisted in fury. "What the hell is going on here?" the deputy demanded. Karen swallowed hard. I'm so sorry, officer. It was an accident. My drone, it just lost control." The deputy's eyes narrowed. "Your drone, huh? You're the one who's been spying on the whole neighborhood with that thing, aren't you?" Karen felt her face grow hot. I wasn't spying. I was just trying to keep an eye on things, make sure everything was safe." "Safe?" The deputy interrupted, voice rising. "You crashed your little toy right into my patrol car. Do you have any idea how much that's gonna cost to fix?" Karen opened her mouth to respond, but the growing crowd of onlookers cut her off with a chorus of outraged shouts. "She's been spying on us for weeks. I knew something wasn't right. The way the thing was always hovering around. This is an invasion of our privacy." Karen's eyes darted from one accusing face to the next, panic rising in her chest. This was not how this was supposed to go. She was the HOA president, the one in charge of maintaining order and safety in the neighborhood. How dare these people turn on her like this? Sensing the shift in the crowd's mood, the deputy stepped forward, hand resting on the holster at his hip. "All right, everyone, settle down. I'm gonna need you all to step back and let me handle this." Karen swallowed hard, bracing herself for what was to come. This was far from over. Karen Richardson paced back and forth in her living room, hands trembling. This was an unmitigated disaster. She'd been so careful, so vigilant in her efforts to keep the neighborhood safe. How could it have all gone so wrong? Her eyes darted to the shattered drone lying on the coffee table, a bitter reminder of her humiliating public confrontation with the sheriff's deputy. The look of fury on his face, the jeering crowd of neighbors, it was all too much to bear. A knock at the door made her jump. Steeling herself, she opened it to find her husband, Greg, standing on the porch, face etched with concern. "What the hell happened out there, Karen?" he demanded. "I just got a call from Marge, saying the whole neighborhood is in an uproar over your drone." Karen's chin quivered. "It was an accident, Greg. The drone it lost control and crashed right into the sheriff's car." Greg's eyes widened. "You crashed it into a cop car? Do you have any idea how much trouble you could be in?" I know," Karen cried, throwing her hands up. "The deputy was furious, and all the neighbors were yelling at me. They think I was spying on them or something." Greg pinched the bridge of his nose. "Well, were you?" Karen bristled. Of course not. I was just trying to keep an eye on things, make sure everything was safe and secure. That's my job as HOA president. Your job is to maintain property values and organize block parties, Karen, Greg retorted. Not to fly around like some kind of neighborhood watchdog with a camera drone. Karen's face flushed with indignation. Don't you see? I was doing it for all of us, to protect our community from. From what exactly? Greg interrupted, voice laced with exasperation. Jill watering her flowers. The mailman making his rounds. You've got to be kidding me. Karen opened her mouth to protest, but another insistent knock cut her off. Gritting her teeth, she swung the door open to find the deputy standing on her doorstep, arms crossed sternly over his chest. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come down to the station with me, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. We need to have a little chat about that drone of yours. Karen's heart sank. This was far from over. The fluorescent lights of the police station felt oppressive as Karen Richardson fidgeted uncomfortably in the hard plastic chair. Across the desk, the sheriff's deputy fixed her with a stern gaze, fingers tapping impatiently against the file folder in front of him. So, let me get this straight, he said, leaning back in his chair. You've been flying that drone of yours over the entire neighborhood, spying on your neighbors under the guise of community safety. Karen swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. I wasn't spying, officer. I was just trying to keep an eye on things, make sure everything was secure. The deputy scoffed. Secure? You crashed that thing right into the side of my patrol car. That's not exactly what I'd call secure. Karen winced, the memory of the sickening crunch still fresh in her mind. It was an accident, she insisted. The drone just lost control. Uh-huh. The deputy fixed her with a skeptical look. And how long have you been flying that thing around? Huh. Weeks? Months? Karen hesitated, mind racing. I don't know. A few weeks, maybe. I was just trying to be a responsible HOA president. That's all. Responsible? The deputy scoffed. Lady, you were invading your neighbor's privacy and violating their civil liberties. That's not responsible. That's downright criminal. Karen felt a flare of indignation. Criminal? I was just trying to keep our community safe. Safe from what? The deputy shot back. Jill watering her flowers. The mailman doing his job. Come on, you know that's a load of bull. Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the deputy held up a hand, silencing her. Look, I get it. You were trying to be the big kahuna of the neighborhood. But flying that drone around without people's consent, that's a major breach of privacy. You could be facing some serious fines, maybe even jail time. Karen's eyes widened in alarm. Jail time. But I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to. The deputy interrupted, his voice rising. You crashed that thing right into my car. That's property damage, not to mention the invasion of privacy. He shook his head, fixing her with a stern look. I'm gonna have to confiscate that drone as evidence, and you're gonna have to come down to the station to give a full statement. Karen felt her heart sink. This was quickly spiraling out of control. She needed to do something, and fast, before it was too late. Karen Richardson paced back and forth in her living room, mind racing. After her disastrous encounter with the sheriff's deputy, she knew she had to act fast to salvage the situation. The drone, her prized possession and the source of her downfall, sat on the coffee table, a grim reminder of the chaos she had unleashed. She couldn't let the authorities confiscate it, not when it held the key to proving her innocence. Glancing out the window, Karen watched as a familiar figure emerged from the house across the street. Jill, her nosy neighbor. Narrowing her eyes, Karen made a decision. She swept the drone into her arms and hurried outside, approaching Jill with a forced smile. Jill, just the person I was hoping to see, she chirped, trying to sound casual. Jill eyed her warily. Karen, what do you want? I wanted to apologize for the, The incident with the drone earlier, Karen said, mustering a contrite expression. It was an honest mistake, I assure you. I never meant to invade anyone's privacy. Jill's brows knitted together skeptically. Uh-huh. And what exactly are you doing with that thing now? Karen glanced down at the drone, hugging it protectively to her chest. Oh, this. I was just going to, dismantle it. You know, make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Jill's eyes narrowed. I find that hard to believe, Karen. You were obsessed with that thing, flying it around like some kind of neighborhood watchdog. Karen felt her frustration bubbling to the surface. Look, Jill, I was only trying to keep our community safe. You know how important that is to me as HOA president. Safe? Jill scoffed. You call invading our privacy safe? I don't buy it, Karen. You were spying on all of us, and now you're trying to cover your tracks. Karen gritted her teeth, struggling to maintain her composure. That's not true. I was just. Save it, Jill interrupted, holding up a hand. I'm going to the police, Karen. You can't just crash a drone into a cop car and expect to get away with it. Karen's heart sank as Jill turned and marched away, pulling out her phone. She had to act fast before everything spiraled further out of control. Clutching the drone tightly, Karen made a split-second decision and hurried back inside, slamming the door behind her. Time was running out, and she needed a plan. Fast. Karen Richardson paced anxiously in her living room, the damaged drone gripped tightly in her hands. Jill's threat to go to the police had sent a jolt of panic through her, and she knew she had to act quickly before the situation spun even further out of control. Glancing out the window, she saw Jill hurrying down the sidewalk, phone pressed to her ear. Karen's heart raced. She had to do something, and she had to do it now. Inspiration struck, and she rushed to the kitchen, snatching up a large kitchen knife. With trembling hands, she began methodically dismantling the drone, ripping out the wiring and cameras. She couldn't let the authorities get their hands on it. The footage it contained could incriminate her beyond repair. As she worked, a knock came at the front door. Karen froze, her breath catching in her throat. Had Jill already alerted the police? Steeling herself, she crept towards the door, knife still in hand. Peering through the peephole, she let out a shaky breath of relief. It was only Greg, her husband, looking concerned. Karen, what's going on? He demanded as she opened the door. Jill just called me, said you were going crazy with that drone again. Karen ushered him inside, eyes darting around nervously. Greg, we're in big trouble. I need your help. Greg's brow furrowed as he caught sight of the dismantled drone and the knife in her hand. Whoa, what the hell is going on? Why do you have that thing taken apart? Jill's going to the police, Greg, Karen hissed. She's going to tell them everything. About the drone, about me spying on the neighbors. We have to get rid of it before they find it. Greg's eyes widened in alarm. Spying on the neighbors? Karen, what were you thinking? I was trying to keep our community safe, Karen insisted, her voice rising with desperation. But now it's all falling apart, and I can't let them find this drone. Please, Greg, you have to help me. Greg hesitated, his gaze shifting between the drone and his wife's pleading expression. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he nodded. All right. What do you need me to do? Karen's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you, Greg. I need you to take this thing and get rid of it. Bury it, dump it in the lake. I don't care. Just make sure the police never find it. Greg grimly gathered up the dismantled drone, his jaw set with determination. Okay, I'll take care of it. But Karen, you better hope this doesn't come back to bite us in the ass. Karen nodded, already rushing to the window to keep an eye out for Jill or the police. It won't, I promise. Just hurry, Greg. Time is running out. As her husband slipped out the door, Karen felt a twinge of guilt, but she quickly pushed it aside. This was for the good of the community, she told herself. No matter what it took, she had to protect her reputation and her position as HOA president. The tense silence in the Richardson household was shattered by the sudden blaring of the doorbell. Karen's heart leaped into her throat as she hurried to the front door, peering cautiously through the peephole. Standing on the porch was a grim-faced sheriff's deputy, his arms crossed over his chest. Karen swallowed hard, her hand trembling as she unlocked the door. "Ma'am, we need to have a word," the deputy said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Karen forced a shaky smile. "Oh, of course, officer. What seems to be the problem?" The deputy fixed her with a stern look. "We've received a report that you've been tampering with evidence related to the drone incident earlier today." Karen felt her blood run cold. "Evidence? I'm not sure what you mean." "Cut the crap, ma'am," the deputy interrupted. "Your neighbor, Jill, said she saw you dismantling the drone just a little while ago." Karen's mind raced, desperately searching for a plausible explanation. "I was just trying to, clean up the mess. You know, make sure there wasn't any debris left on the street." The deputy's eyes narrowed. "Uh-huh. And where's the drone now?" "The drone?" Karen's heart pounded in her ears. "Well, I actually already disposed of it. Didn't want it to cause any more trouble, you know." The deputy's expression hardened. "Disposed of it, huh? That's a pretty convenient story, don't you think?" Karen felt a bead of sweat trickle down her spine. "It's not a story, officer. I was just trying to be responsible." "Responsible?" The deputy scoffed. "Ma'am, you crashed that drone into my patrol car, and now you're trying to cover it up. That's obstruction of justice, and it's a serious crime." Karen's eyes widened in alarm. "Obstruction of justice? But I didn't." "Save it," the deputy snapped. "I'm placing you under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the deputy produced a pair of handcuffs, Karen felt her world crumbling around her. This couldn't be happening. She was the HOA president, a pillar of the community. How could this be happening to her? Panic surging through her, Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the deputy cut her off. "Ma'am, I suggest you keep quiet unless you want to make this even worse for yourself." With a heavy heart, Karen allowed the deputy to cuff her wrists and lead her to the waiting patrol car, the eyes of her horrified neighbors burning into her back. The monotonous hum of the fluorescent lights in the interrogation room did little to settle Karen Richardson's nerves as she sat, hands cuffed, across the table from the stern-faced sheriff's deputy. "All right, ma'am, let's start from the beginning," the deputy said, his gaze unwavering. "Why don't you tell me exactly what happened with that drone of yours?" Karen swallowed hard, her mind racing to find the right words. I was just trying to keep an eye on the neighborhood, make sure everything was safe and secure. As the HOA president, it's my job too." "Your job?" the deputy interrupted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Last time I checked, being the HOA president doesn't give you the right to spy on your neighbors with a drone." Karen felt a flare of indignation. "I wasn't spying. I was just trying to be responsible, to protect our community." The deputy leaned back in his chair, fixing her with a skeptical look. "Protect the community, huh? By crashing your little toy into the side of my patrol car." Karen's cheeks burned with shame. "That was an accident, I swear. The drone just lost control." "Uh-huh." The deputy shook his head, lips pressed into a thin line. "And what about the part where you tried to destroy the evidence?" Karen's heart sank. I was just trying to clean things up, make sure there wasn't any debris left on the street." The deputy scoffed. "Cut the crap, Karen. Jill saw you taking that thing apart. You were trying to cover your tracks, weren't you?" Karen's eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out. I wasn't trying to cover anything up. I was scared, okay. I didn't want to get in trouble." "In trouble?" The deputy leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Ma'am, you already crashed a drone into a police car. That's a pretty serious offense. Trying to destroy the evidence just makes it a whole lot worse. Karen felt panic rising in her chest. But I didn't mean to. I was just trying to protect our community, to keep everything safe. I never wanted any of this to happen. The deputy shook his head, his expression hardening. I'm sorry, ma'am, but that's not gonna fly. You broke the law, and now you're trying to cover it up. That's obstruction of justice, and it's a serious crime. Karen's eyes widened in horror. Obstruction of justice. But I. Save it. The deputy held up a hand, silencing her. I'm going to have to refer this case to the district attorney. You're looking at some hefty fines, and maybe even jail time. Karen felt her world crumbling around her. This couldn't be happening. She was the HOA president, a respected member of the community. How could she have let things spiral so far out of control? Despair overwhelmed her as the deputy rose from his chair, signaling the end of the interrogation. She had to find a way to fix this, no matter what it took. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension as Karen Richardson sat, hands trembling, beside her lawyer. The judge's gavel echoed through the room, signaling the start of the proceedings. It had been a long, arduous road to reach this point, with Karen's obstruction of justice charge looming heavily over her. The community had turned against her, with neighbors testifying to her obsessive use of the drone and her desperate attempt to destroy the evidence. As the prosecution laid out their case, Karen's heart sank. The footage from the drone, recovered by forensic experts, painted a damning picture of her actions. Her claim of protecting the community rang hollow in the face of the clear invasion of privacy. Her lawyer tried his best to mount a defense, arguing that her intentions, however misguided, were ultimately driven by a desire to keep the neighborhood safe. But the judge remained unconvinced, his expression stern and unyielding. When it came time for Karen to take the stand, she felt the weight of all eyes upon her. Swallowing her pride, she recounted the events, her voice wavering with emotion. She pleaded for understanding, insisting that she never meant for things to spiral so far out of control. But the judge was unmoved. Mrs. Richardson, he said, his tone grave, while I understand your desire to maintain order in your community, the law is clear. Your use of that drone was a violation of your neighbor's privacy, and your attempt to destroy the evidence was a serious crime. Karen's heart sank as the judge pronounced her sentence. A hefty fine and a year of probation, with the threat of jail time if she was caught breaking the law again. As she was led out of the courtroom, the jeers and taunts of her former neighbors echoing in her ears, Karen felt an overwhelming sense of shame and defeat. She had been so sure of her righteous cause, so convinced that she was acting in the best interests of the community. But now, as she faced the consequences of her actions, she realized the bitter truth. Her pursuit of power and control had blinded her to the rights and needs of those around her. She had become the very thing she had sworn to protect the community from. A tyrant, a bully, a Karen in the truest sense of the word. As the cell door clanged shut behind her, Karen felt the weight of her mistakes settle heavily upon her shoulders. This was her legacy now. A cautionary tale of the dangers of unchecked authority and the importance of humility, compassion, and respect for one's fellow citizens. It was a harsh lesson, but one Karen knew she had to learn if she ever hoped to redeem herself in the eyes of her community and, more importantly, her own conscience.